What is going on, Built in Buffalo fam, Bills Mafia? How's everybody doing tonight? We got another phenomenal show for you guys tonight. As you can see, though, it's just me and Scott today. Lance, unfortunately, cannot be on this week, but he is here in spirit as always. But yeah, it's just going to be me and Scott today. So it's going to be a good one. We're going to go a little bit over the schedule. I know last week we did our mock schedule, which kind of it's that time of year where you're just trying to have fun with it, right? Now we have this actual schedule out, so we're going to go over that a little bit, and then we're going to talk some offensive line. Last week we talked some defensive line. This week some offensive line. So Scott, how you doing? It's just another Friday night, week 3 of our show here now. So how you doing?
Yeah, doing great. Excited we made it through another week. Excited to talk some Bills with you tonight, Ben. And yeah, we got a big weekend of sports coming up. Not football related, obviously, but we got the Preakness PGA Championship, so maybe Game 7s, NBA, and NHL playoffs. So May is one of those exciting sports months, and happy to break it up a little bit with some Bills talk.
Yeah, it's going to be another good week of sports. We're getting to that time period of close to kind of being that dead period, about a month or two away from it, but it's going to be football season before we know it. So there's a lot to kind of talk about with the Bills, not just about the schedule, but all about the whole team in general. But yeah, and also, by the way, if you haven't already, like, comment, subscribe, go all down below. It really helps support Built in Buffalo, not just me and Scott, not just Lance, but everybody in Built in Buffalo. It really helps us out. And go check out the other shows. I know that, most of you guys do check out all of them, but if you haven't checked them out, go check them out. Everybody here at Built in Buffalo does a phenomenal job on their shows. They might talk about some similar stuff, but everybody gives different insight. It's really cool to kind of see the different aspects and different thoughts from everybody. So make sure to go do that below. But we were going to start it off here with the little schedule release. It came out on Wednesday, and I know that it was technically supposed to be at 8 p.m. Stuff came out that whole day. It's kind of like how a lot of this stuff kind of happens with free agency and draft, but maybe not as much as the draft or free agency, but it does get kind of leaked a little bit. So it's here, and I'll bring it up on the screen right now. We got a pretty good schedule in my opinion. We'll start it off. Just Scott, I'm just going to ask you real quick, just to start off, what are your general thoughts, kind of what stands out to you, and what are any surprises when you're looking at the schedule here?
Yeah, so the one thing that jumps off the bat right away is that back-to-back of the buys in the middle, but KC in San Francisco, back-to-back games in Buffalo. The buy in the middle is big there to kind of regroup and then revamp between those games. But I was surprised with where the buy was. I think a lot of people thought it was going to be earlier in the year. We've had a late buy the last couple of years, it feels like. And it felt like we were due for one of those like week 5 or week 6 buys that everybody kind of dreads. So happy that it's week 12. And happy that it's broken up that kind of juggernaut in the schedule between the Chiefs and the Niners. So that's kind of the 3-week window that I think everybody's probably most excited for.
Yeah, that one, we talked last week about it, and we, originally thought week 7, 6, 5, like real early. And even, before, as the leaks kind of slowly came out, people started piecing it together, and even still thought, I saw a lot of people saying, oh, it's going to be an early buy. It's going to be an early one. So it is nice that it isn't week 5, 6, 7. For me, I know you as well kind of just would have hated that and hated having an early buy. But for me, the part that kind of stands out to me is the fact that weeks 2, 3, 4, and week 6. So 4 out of the first 6 weeks you're on prime time, which it makes sense that the Bills are on prime time. I just thought they might wait till later in the year, but maybe this says something about how they look at the Bills. Maybe they say, hey, it's a new look team, kind of, a lot of guys went left, a lot of guys coming in. Let's give them the early prime time, because if they're not the same Bills as we thought, then later on in the year, we won't have to swap them out or won't have to change the times for them. So that really kind of stands out to me with, having Thursday night, Monday night, Sunday night, and then again, Monday night in week 6. That's really the part that stands out to me. So yeah, not too many surprises though. I think when it came to how they would set it up, I didn't think they would have a huge game week 1 for the Bills. Again, we talked about that as well last week. So were you surprised? We'll start it off with week 1 here with Arizona. It's in Buffalo, 1 o'clock. Is that a surprise to you that they gave the Bills a home game week 1 and a 1 o'clock?
Not surprised it's a home game, nor that it's at 1 o'clock. That seems to be, other than the last couple years, like home opener is usually a Sunday at 1 o'clock. Well, the home opener was at 1 o'clock, but the season opener has been prime time the past 2 years. But the Cardinals, it just feels a little random to me. It's going to be a different season opener. It's not a divisional team. It's not even a conference team. It's not even a good team. So having the Cardinals week 1, I wouldn't say I'm surprised because, they make the schedule however they see it fit. But I don't know if it's going to have the same kind of pomp and circumstance as some of our more recent season opener games there in week 1.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. It is interesting to see kind of how they match it up. You're going to get Kyler Murray coming here, a team like you said that struggled last year, mightily, and they had a high pick. Now they pick Marvin Harrison Jr. That's going to be exciting, though. I will say for a lot of Bills fans, you get to see the debut of Marvin Harrison Jr. So for me, the Cardinals is a pretty big shock. I thought they would go AFC team for the Bills week 1. I'm not really shocked about 1 o'clock. I know we talked about that last week. I didn't think that it would be prime time. I would have been shocked. So I'm happy that it is week 1 as well, or that it is a 1 o'clock game as well. Just get the fans going as they're normal. What they like the most. I know a lot of fans love 1 o'clock games in Buffalo. Get the crowd going, get the stadium going, let Josh Allen and the Bills kind of get their feet under them. Hopefully this should be a game that they can come into, and there might be a little bit of rust, and that if there is a little bit of rust, that might bode well facing a team that isn't as good. So yeah, I kind of like the Cardinals being week 1. And before we move on to week 2 here, I do want to bring up John's comment. John said, do OTAs start Monday the 20th? And I do believe they do. It's the 20th, 21st,
Yep.
not the 22nd, I believe, and then the 23rd.
Yep,
it is
right.
starting Monday. And I believe it is at One Bills Drive. So we'll see some videos there, some Keon Coleman, some Cole Bishop probably. So some a little bit of everything. But yeah, it is this upcoming week. But week 2, we talked about Cardinals a little bit. They're not too much to talk about with that game, right? We kind of covered it all there with it's interdivision or it's interconference, bad team last year versus a good team this year. New look Bills, but kind of not a completely different looking Cardinals team, but maybe a healthier Cardinals team. Now you have Kyler Murray, who's not starting the year on injured, like we said with Marvin Harrison Jr., but a lot of the same type of players because they are in that rebuilding stage. So, but week 2 is where it gets interesting now. I mean, for one, I'll just start it off here. I am shocked that they went Thursday night this early for the Bills and Dolphins. I thought even Dolphins this early would have been a shock to me. So I'm shocked it's week 2. I would have thought they would have waited a little bit. I get having them I get having them at night in Miami this early. But again, I thought if you're going to have a game in Miami, it's going to be later in the year. You're going to not want to hear these fan bases go back and forth about heat, about snow, and about just whatever else it is. So for me, I'm excited that it is Thursday night. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm glad that we're getting the Thursday night out of the way because I'm not personally a huge fan of Thursday nights. But I'm just very, very shocked that it is the Dolphins that they chose to put Thursday night with the Bills this early. So what do you think about the Dolphins in Miami? Not going to necessarily have to deal with the heat as much. And a lot of Dolphins fans didn't love that. So what do you think?
Yeah, agree with everything you said. I don't like Thursday night football. I hate it when the Bills play in it, and when they're not in it, it's still not my favorite. But it's another night of football, so you can't complain that much. But yeah, I'm happy they get it out of the way early, get it out of the way in week 2 before that they're really more banged up later in the season and need all the days rest that they can get. It'll be nice having that mini bye going into a Jags game, where the Jags should be an improved team this season. I have them at home on Monday the week after, like we'll get to next. But yeah, it's also nice that we're not going to see our old rival, the Sun, down in Miami this year. Ray Baker will not be out, as Coach Orgeron calls the Sun. So yeah, hopefully it's not as hot. And getting Miami earlier in the season, maybe they're still figuring it out, still trying to click their offense a little bit more. So hopefully we can get them down at their place. And yeah, Thursday night, not a fan, but happy it's earlier in the year instead of later.
What are your thoughts before we move on to week 3? What are your thoughts just on the dynamic of Dolphins fans as soon as they saw that get announced and kind of leaked? all of them were very upset. I mean, not all of them. I'm not going to say all, but a majority of them were very upset from what at least I saw. So what are your thoughts on just that aspect of the week 2 game?
Yeah, it was funny because that's like the biggest thing that like Dolphins fans will go on about, or and Bills fans too. Like we're guilty of it as well. Is like complaining about the sun in Miami and how the stadium's designed so it hits the road team, which of course it would be because why would they design a stadium to not benefit themselves? And then like they have to come up here in the winter and play in the snow. So they're kind of skipping both of it this year. The NFL is kind of copping out a little bit because we go there at night, play at night, and they come here in November, I think it is, or maybe even October, week 9. So it won't be as cold. So maybe they're trying to appease some fan bases on Twitter. I doubt that's it, but yeah, there's always something to complain about. We'll complain about the sun, they'll complain about the snow, and at the end of the day, it's just football. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that was my first reaction as well, and I got a chance to talk to some of my buddies who are Dolphins fans, and at first they were very, like, oh, of course they would do this for the Bills, of course, and then it came out that they weren't going to miss the snow, and we all kind of had the same reaction then of, okay, now neither fan base can say a word about it. It's now just line up against each other and who's the best team that week. So yeah, it's funny. We'll see. Who knows? I mean, who knows? Might watch it be like super snowy in early November here in Buffalo, and they have to play against it. So who knows? We'll see. It's Buffalo at the end of the day. You can get snow, and I wouldn't be shocked in late September at some points. But yeah, so that's week 2. Week 2 is a good one. Miami starting off division pretty early, but week 3. We got Jacksonville. This was what at least I thought was going to be week 1. I thought you'd have Mitch Morse coming back here. I thought you'd have, Gabe Davis coming back here. So it's week 3 though. It is Monday night though. It is it's I think a good Monday night matchup. I feel like the Jaguars and the Bills always match up well and have some pretty good games. I'm glad it's just not in London like last year, because we all know how that happened, what happened there. But yeah, so this Monday night game against Jacksonville week 3, what are your thoughts there on that one?
Yeah, this should be a big game. The Jags have playoff aspirations. We certainly do as well. They had a pretty disappointing year last year. I know Trevor Lawrence was banged up, which definitely didn't help them, but they didn't make the playoffs. They went in big favorites to win their division and didn't even end up making the playoffs, and then lost to the Titans, who were completely out of it in the last week of the season when they still had a chance to get in. So it'll be fun to have some of our boys back in town. Mitch Morse, Gabe Davis, like you mentioned. Monday night primetime games in the Bill Stadium are always a lot of fun. The tailgate gets pretty wild. People get real fired up. So hopefully everybody paces themselves early in the season before they get into their rhythm. But yeah, I think that'll be a big one. Definitely a game we could see in the playoffs. So if we can get them early in the year, that should definitely help our chances as we get later and those AFC tiebreakers start to matter a little more.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you another question about this game is, do you see Gabe Davis week 3? It's still early in the season, coming back to Buffalo. It's prime time, which, big game Gabe, right? That was what a lot of people called him. Is this a game that you could see Gabe Davis kind of having his revenge and having a big game there against maybe, a secondary that he's pretty familiar with?
I mean, he definitely could. I hope not, because he's not our friend anymore. But yeah, he definitely did tend to shine when the lights were brightest. A little bit less this past season, but some of that was due to some injuries. But yeah, it'll be interesting. It seemed like Tony. I would joke with some of my buddies that Tony Romo must think that Gabe Davis is the best receiver to ever play the game of football, because every big CBS game that he had, he seemed to score a touchdown or 2 or 3 or 4 in that one game. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that transfers over to Jacksonville.
Yeah, and it's going to be kind of it's not even just going to be, Gabe coming back. I'm going to be interested to see the narrative of Gabe Davis and now whoever the guy that they think has replaced him on this Bills offense, how going into week 3, there might be questions by that point. Hey, are they missing Gabe Davis already? Or, hey, are they already moved on from him and they already got their replacement, and whoever it is, whether it's Coleman that is going to play that role, or even from the Falcons that we just signed that I'm blanking on.
Mac Hollins.
Who knows who it will be, right? There's a bunch of guys that could potentially take that role, or could be a completely different looking offense. So it's gonna be interesting to see kind of that narrative too going into week 3, because everybody loves to make narratives early on in the season, even after 2 weeks. But going on to week 4, this is where it's kind of interesting. You just talked about it, right? With the 3 weeks, or with a 3-week stretch here. Got a 3-week stretch away, but it starts with a very tough one. This is a really tough stretch. So we can, even if you want,
Yeah.
talk about all 3 of these games at once, kind of a little bit. With you go at Baltimore on Sunday Night Football, who we all know Baltimore is a very good football team. At Houston, which, I mean, that game everybody already knows is going to be hyped up. It's going to be very anticipated, not just by Bills Mafia, not just by the Texans fans, but by NFL fans all over, to see kind of how Stephon Diggs in that situation comes about. And then you have the Jets, which is another night game, again, Monday night in New Jersey. So it's going to be, again, Aaron Rodgers. Can he stay on the field for longer than 5 minutes this time? But it's going to be a good one for those 3 weeks. It's a tough stretch. So what is your thoughts just kind of on this stretch in general, and then on each game individually?
Yeah, just one thing before we get into that. Speaking of, Aaron Rodgers on Monday night, the Jets opening up on Monday night against Leonard Floyd is objectively hilarious. So hopefully he makes it through that first. But yeah, this is one of those 3-week stretches that you look at it and you're like, I hope we win 2 of these. I don't care which 2 they are. I just hope we go 2-1 in this 3-game stretch. Obviously, 3-0 would be the dream, but it's probably a little unrealistic. So it's like, if we can get through these 3 games and win 2 of them, like, that sets us up really well for kind of that middle part of the season where the schedule eases up a little bit. But that's the thing in the NFL. When you win your division, you got a tough schedule the next year, which we've been fallen victim to these past 4 years. So yeah, if we can win 2 out of the 3 of these, don't care which 2 they are, just get them, and then it should set you up well down the stretch. Baltimore will be fun. I know I said this last week. I live in Baltimore. I can walk to the stadium from my house, so I'm sure quite a few of my friends will be coming down to stay with me. Hopefully you and Lance as well, if we can catch that game. And the Stephon Diggs revenge game will be a good one for the national media. They'll love that, and I'm sure that's all we'll hear about all week on the talking head shows out there. And then the Jets divisional game, hopefully they have Aaron Rodgers this time, just because I like to watch him play, because he's a good player, and the game is better when the good players are playing. Big divisional game in prime time on Monday night. So yeah, it's a big stretch. Win 2 of them, and I think they're set up great for the rest of the year.
And you look at the 3 weeks before that, right? We talked about the Cardinals being kind of an easier opponent, but then Dolphins, Jags. So this 5-week stretch is altogether is pretty rough. So how important to you is it to kind of get off to a hot start in those first 3 weeks? Looking at this 3-week stretch, does it make those first 3 weeks even more important to you?
Yeah, I think it does. We can't necessarily afford to have like that Cardinals game be like, oh shoot, I think like 3 years ago we opened against the Steelers, who weren't supposed to be very good, and they ended up blocking a punt and they stole one from us. We still ended up winning the division, so it was okay. But with how tough the schedule is, especially how tough it is early, like, can't afford to do that this year. Like, you got to beat the teams you're supposed to beat, or else later in the season, like, the work's going to be really, really tough for us. I know this past year it went 6-6 and rattled off 5 in a row, but not necessarily something you can count on. So I think if they start slow this year, the schedule may be a little too tough to crawl out of.
Yeah, and especially with the this new look offense, with new weapons coming in, and the defense kind of having the old players come out, new players coming in, it makes it even that more important to win. At least in my opinion, you have to go at least 2-1 in those first 3, and then, like you said, you ideally at least win 2 out of the next 3 in those weeks 4, 5, and 6. So when you're looking at the first 6 weeks, it's kind of a little bit daunting after week 1, because you have teams that have made the playoffs, at least teams that are up and coming. Obviously not the Jets, because we know the Jets haven't made it in a while, but they have Aaron Rodgers back now too. So it's going to be a tough one. I mean, for me, the Baltimore game necessarily, that's one that doesn't scare me too much, just because when we look at how Baltimore has played against the Bills, I think the Bills match up very well. I think Sean McDermott has a very good game plan against that style of offense. And, the Ravens, as much as they, are a great team, they did lose some players this offseason. So they are also going to be kind of a different looking team, not maybe as much as the Bills. And I think they'll still be a great team, but who knows with them as well. It could be week 4, maybe if the Bills and Ravens are kind of both struggling out the gate, 1-2, 2-1, that game can mean even more. The Texans, obviously, we know this could honestly be a playoff, like you said with the Jags, it could be a playoff kind of preview here, and it's also just on top of that you have the Stephon Diggs situation coming into factor. So that game to me is the most interesting. The fact that they put that week 5 for me, I thought it would have been a little bit later, and I thought it would have also been a prime time game just due to the narratives that you can create around it and the kind of hype that you can create around it. But I do get why they would have kept it at 1. I kind of like that they did, because it kind of just doesn't put as much pressure on the game, especially during a stretch like this. And then you finish it off with the Jets. I mean, that game might be the one that scares me the most out of this, because let's say you go 2-3 in those first 5 games. The Jets are a team that Josh Allen struggles against. If they do have Aaron Rodgers that game and he can stay healthy, they're already significantly better than they were last year. So that game to me scares me the most early on. Obviously, once we get to week 9, you can answer that. But out of week 9, the first 9 weeks, that
I think Ben might have froze there. So before he goes back on talking about that Jets game, yeah, that's probably one of the ones that scares me the most in the first 9 weeks as well. Divisional game on the road in prime time. Josh Allen tends to struggle against the Jets, the way he mentioned. They're going to have a good defense. They're going to have a good secondary. And just always think of last year, Josh Allen trying to force the ball down the field 3 times and throwing 3 picks. And if he doesn't do that, they probably get out of that week 1 game with the win. So if Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy, that'll be definitely a fun one to watch, and definitely a tough matchup. This division this year is going to be tough, the AFC East. The Patriots should be better. Not saying they're going to win any more than 4 or 5 games, but they should be better. We'll see what they have in Drake May. What the Dolphins are going to be. They're a good team. And then the Jets, see what they can do. If they can, stay healthy, they have a great offense. And it looks like Ben's back. I was just filling in where you left off, talking about the Jets and just kind of how the whole AFC East should be a little bit better this year.
Yeah, it definitely should. And again, 2 weeks in a row, I got to figure this out here, what's going on here. But yeah, so yeah, as I was just saying, yeah, the AFC East is going to be better this year as well with the Jets, as we mentioned. And I got to pull this back up here for us. But yeah, it's going to be, a good battle with even the Dolphins we've had in the past few years. Obviously, the Bills have gotten the better of the Dolphins, but the Jets, again, if Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy, it's going to be one of those kind of rivalries that can kind of reignite again with a Jets and Bills, or Jets Dolphins, or all 3 of them again. Obviously, the Patriots might be the odd man out here. Sorry, any Patriots fans that ever, if you by chance happen to catch this. But yeah, sorry to any Patriots fans. But yeah, that stretch is going to be tough. And week 6, that's when teams start kind of turning the corner. You start to kind of tell, all right, these are the good teams, these are the bad teams. They start to catch their footing fully and kind of start making those pushes. So yeah, week 6, it's going to be a big one there. So yeah, just that's the game to me that when I look at that Jets game, that one scares me the most. I mean, the Jets scares me every single year. So yeah, but that week 6 is a tough one there, especially on Monday night. So we'll see though how that one goes. But after that one, you do kind of get a little bit of a easier game necessarily. I mean, to me, the Titans are still going to be one of those teams that you don't necessarily want to play, but they are, when you look at the schedule, one of the worst teams on paper. They have a new regime coming in there. They got a new Will Levis, kind of got new weapons there. They're making changes. They're in that kind of in the middle rebuild stage. Derrick Henry is no longer there, so that's going to be a first too. So what do you think about that 1 o'clock at home? You come back after that 3-week stretch. Do you like that week 7 coming back home to Tennessee?
Yeah, that's one of those games that, depending how the first 6 go, it could be a huge trap game. Like, say the Bills play out of their minds in that 3-game stretch and they sweep Baltimore, Houston, and the Jets. Like, it's real easy to kind of go into that Titans game a little bit like, oh, like this is an easy week. They're not as good. Like, maybe they don't prepare as hard or lock in as much that week. Like, that's a classic trap game type opportunity. Hopefully it doesn't come to that, but that's one of those games on paper that they should win. I don't really know if there's a whole lot else to say about it. Like, Will Levis will be fun to see because it's 2nd year in the league and he has a big arm and he can make all the throws. But that's one of those games that, barring any kind of like trap game type energy, should be a Bills easy win. I think right now they're favored by like 8 or 9 in that game. So you imagine that only grows if the Bills play well to start the season.
Yeah, and that you're talking about trap games. Last year obviously there were essentially three of them in the middle of the season last year, right? With the Giants and the Broncos, and we all remember that stretch. That was a tough one. That, like you said, it could be similar to that, where if the Bills are rolling, they could look at this team and say, "Oh, well, we're back home now. We just got through one of the tougher parts of our schedule." And, obviously they're an NFL team. They're not going to take it easy, but mindset plays a lot big factor, I think, into a lot of these games as well. And, especially with a team that isn't as familiar with each other, right? We got young guys, like I've been saying a million times this show, is that's going to play a big factor in how the schedule plays out. So week 7, I do like having Tennessee come here in the middle of the year. I didn't think they would put it towards the end of the year. It wouldn't make sense there. So yeah, I think Tennessee, that should be a win. They should go and get that win there. And then they go back on the road again. So you get a lot of away games early on, right? That's the good part. You get the away games out of the way. Obviously, you still have some down the stretch, but at least you get the farther traveling away, except for the obviously the Rams late. But besides that, Indy's pretty close, Detroit's pretty close. So you get the farther traveling with Houston, Seattle now coming up. So Seattle, we got that 4:00 game. We kind of thought if it is away, it's going to be 4:00 at Seattle. It's farther away. Does this game scare you at all? I mean, the Seattle's kind of a weirder team to me. They're up and down. They have great players, but when you kind of think of them, at least me, I don't think of them as a powerhouse team. So what do you think about the Seattle matchup here in week 8?
Yeah, Seattle's one of those teams that the past couple of years has kind of overplayed their expectations. They didn't make the playoffs last year, but they maybe had expectations too. But the year before, when Geno Smith kind of came out of nowhere and took them to the playoffs, and they were a good team, everybody was like, "Wow!" Like they thought they were rebuilding. Look at them; they're a playoff team. I don't think Geno Smith is their long-term answer at quarterback. I don't think they think that either. They're a solid team. New coaching regime there as well. So be interested to see if their identity changes a little bit. They were very defensive under Pete Carroll. So interesting to see what this team looks like this year. Should be a win, but whenever a team has to travel across the country, you never know. And it's a team that we don't really see all that often either. So don't know a ton about them, but won't know their tendencies until they sit down and break down the film. And it might take until week 6, 7, 8 to see what they're gonna do with new coaching and probably a new offense and a new defense. So there may not be tons of film out on what they do, time in and time out on the field. So it'll be a fun game. It's one of the road games I plan to go to this year, which is exciting. Seattle's a pretty cool city. So yeah, that'll be a fun one, but one that I think the Bills should win if they play well.
Yeah, and this one, to me, when I look at the Seattle Seahawks, I mean, we've talked a little bit over the past few weeks about the Bills trading for a receiver necessarily, and DK Metcalf has been in rumors as well. Week 8, that's right around that time, right? It is that time of the year where trades happen. If the Bills do, get to week 7 and they struggle against Tennessee, the passing game isn't the same. Who knows? Maybe they do make a move for DK Metcalf. That storyline could be happening there in week 8. But even nonetheless, let's say the Seattle does keep DK Metcalf. Does this game scare you at all when it comes to, you look at Seattle's receiving core with Tyler Lockett, who's had a phenomenal career, DK Metcalf, who we all know of, and then, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who got injured a little bit early last year, started to come on a little bit, especially once the offensive line for Seattle started to get healthy. They started to play more with 3 wide receiver sets. Does that matchup kind of make you nervous, especially with, Trey White obviously hasn't been playing for the Bills too much, but you have an inexperienced guy, necessarily not inexperienced, but a less experienced guy in Christian Benford, who has also had injury problems. You've had Rasul Douglas, who is now coming into a contract year. Does that matchup kind of scare you at all, especially with even the safeties now changing as well?
I wouldn't say it scares me that much. Their receiving core is very good. I'd say it's the strength of their offense for sure. Rasul Douglas is a certified number 1 corner in the NFL now. I think last year, the second half of the year in Buffalo, he proved that. Christian Benford is a really solid number 2 cornerback. And going into his 3rd year, he started playoff games for this team. He's been the number 1 corner in some games when guys were hurt. So I think it's hard to call him unexperienced at this point. like he's kind of going into the prime of his career, honestly, based on like his age and like years in the league. And the safeties, I hope will be able to by that point kind of start to be gelling, start to be figuring it out. I think Rapp being out there helps because he's been in the defense for a year and kind of help be that vocal leader. Cole Bishop, if he's the starter opposite Rapp, either him or Mike Edwards, by that point, hopefully they're pretty well gelled in the system and they know what they're doing and they're working more as a unit as opposed to as individuals. So yeah, the receiving core is definitely dangerous. Like DK Metcalf is too big to be moving as fast as he does. So definitely scares me. But hopefully by that point, our secondary is kind of starting to have an identity and is starting to gel a little bit more.
Yeah, and Sean McDermott, we all know how much he can get the best out of his secondary as well. So by then, they, like you said, hopefully should be piecing it together if they haven't by then already. But then we get to week 9, move on from Seattle. You come back home again. You get the Dolphins again. So by week 9, before week 10, before you hit double-digit weeks, you're done with the Dolphins. That's it. Boom. Done. Don't have to worry about them at least playing them. So it's a 1 o'clock game. I knew we kind of thought one of these games would be 1 o'clock. This is, I believe, early November. I think it's November 3rd, if I'm not mistaken. So it's early November. Miami comes here. They shouldn't at least have to deal with snow. Maybe a little bit colder, but again, not too bad. So what do you think about having the Dolphins finish up this early and coming to Buffalo at 1 o'clock?
Yeah, this surprised me that we're done with the Dolphins by the midway point of the season. I thought that they would save one Dolphins game and one Jets game for the end. I kind of thought maybe this was a spot we would play the first Patriots game, and then we could end with, like one of each of the division, and then have kind of where the Patriots are that last week, maybe the Dolphins again, or maybe the Dolphins in week 17, Jets week 18. So it surprises me that the teams that are both like the co-favorites to win the division, I would say, are done with each other this early. I'm okay with it because it's nice to end with the Patriots in 2 of the last 3 weeks. If the Bills are in a tough division battle, it's nice to have the Pats 2 out of 3 times there. So the game being at 1 o'clock doesn't surprise me. I would have been shocked if they had both Bills Dolphins games in prime time. But yeah, I am surprised that we're done with the Dolphins by week 9. It'll be weird down the stretch because the division could come down to these 2 teams again and not them playing each other and like duking it out on the field like they did last year to win the division. It'll be a little weird.
Yeah, and it's maybe this is the NFL saying, hey, we see the Bills, we see the Dolphins past few years, but maybe they do think the Jets are right there with the Bills and Dolphins. They obviously have had a very good defense. They have some solid weapons there. Maybe they do look at it and say, hey, Bills, Dolphins, you guys have been it for the past few years, but maybe the Jets are going to be the team. Then we wanted you guys to be done early, and then we'll focus on the Jets down the road. But yeah, I'm a little bit shocked having them be done this early. I mean, like you said, they've had some great games. They've had games that people have talked about for weeks. I mean, even to the end of the season, right, with kind of getting close with the division. So I'm very, very shocked that it ends week 9. But like you said, I'm not mad at it at all. We don't have to then hear about it. Even if the Bills do drop both Dolphins games, you have then the rest of the season to kind of fight back into whatever the division race is, even if you have to fight back after losing those 2. So I'm glad it's week 9. Glad you get it done and over with. You don't have to worry about again, the weather on either side. So both fan bases kind of get their wishes. The one doesn't have to deal with the snow. The other doesn't have to deal with the heat. So week 9, Dolphins coming to Buffalo at 1 o'clock. But before we get into week 10, we are going to do our 1 minute segment here. Or actually, Scott's going to do his 1 minute segment here. Obviously, Lance doesn't have one this week. He tried to make time to kind of make a little video for everybody, but he's had a very busy week, so just unfortunately could not this time. But he'll be back next week with his 1 minute segment. So Scott, we're going to go to you. We're going to get your 1 minute segment here. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, so wanted to talk a little bit about the schedule release process and just kind of how it's kind of weird. So like the NFL had their schedule release show at 8 o'clock on Wednesday night, but everybody had the whole Bills schedule from like the middle of the day. Everything gets leaked on Twitter. Networks will leak their primetime games. It's almost like, what's the point of having the big show? It kind of takes the fun out of it. Because I remember, a few years ago, they would have the schedule release show, and that was when everybody together saw what the schedule was. But this year going into it, like everybody knew what it was, and it kind of took the fun out of it, at least for me. I think it's kind of stupid. I understand the NFL tries to take as much media coverage as they can throughout the whole year because the NFL is king, but I think they could have a better way of unveiling the schedule. It just isn't very fun. Kind of takes the surprise out of it. It's like, oh, the schedule release, but yeah, like I've known who the Bills are going to play for hours, and I've known 5 or 6 of the games for days now. So I just think that they could have a better way of doing it, so there's a little bit more excitement around it. And then the last part, I know my Derby horse I gave you 2 weeks ago lost by a nostril, but we got the Preakness coming up this Saturday in my backyard here in Baltimore. Horse I like there, Tuscan Sun, going off at 8-1 right now. Didn't run the Kentucky Derby, was saving himself for the Preakness, so he'll be fresh. So Tuscan Sun, 8-1. Do with that what you will, and if you take it, hopefully he runs well.
Alrighty, that was we talked about that a little bit before the show, the whole schedule process, and I know it makes a lot of people upset. It makes me upset as well because I want to be surprised, man. I don't want to have to, I want it to all come out at once. But as you said, you had the answer by 3:00 beforehand, and
I was hoping that like the leaks. I was hoping that the leak stuff was like wrong, so I could have like some kind of excitement, but it wasn't, and I was like, oh, that was anticlimactic. But at least we got a funny Josh Allen, Andy Dwyer video living in the pit. That was good, at least.
Yeah, some of the social media teams, I will say, do a phenomenal job, and the Bills are right up there with the top tier social media teams. But before we go back into week 10 here, I did want to bring up 2 comments here from John. John, there's the first one is that he just wanted to announce the Bills are heading back to St. John Fisher, which is, again, awesome. I think everybody loves going to St. John Fisher for training camp, which does start on July 24th. So, Scott, just, I guess, quick thoughts on them going back to Fisher.
Yeah, I like it. Their campus is really nice. We played quite a bit there in college. I went to St. Lawrence. Unfortunately, they knocked our lacrosse team out of the NCAA tournament this past weekend, so not the biggest St. John Fisher fan at the moment. But they have really nice facilities because the Bills have training camp there. Like I said, I played there in college quite a few times, so know how nice they are firsthand. And I like that they go to a college. It seems like it gives a little bit more like it feels a little bit more like football and training camp. Like you go to like Josh Allen staying in someone's like freshman dorm. It's kind of funny. It kind of feels a little bit more like old school and gritty. The NFL needs more grit. Like they don't have to go to resorts or stay in their $1 million houses. Like let's get gritty. Let's stay in a dorm. Let's have to use a box fan because there's no AC. I like it. And St. John Fisher is a nice facility.
Yeah, and hopefully, I believe somebody's broke last year, somebody's air conditioner. I think it might have been Steve Tasker or Maddie Glab. It was one of those two, I think, that had one of their air conditioners break. So they were struggling a little bit last year. So hopefully that doesn't happen this year. And then the second comment that I want.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was say it's just funny seeing them walk in like carrying like TVs and PlayStations and mini fridges, and it's just funny. Like these guys make how much money, and they're like packing to go off to college, like just like we did, like bringing their snacks and their TV and like just hanging out. I feel like it's good team bonding too. It's everybody staying in the dorms, nothing to do but hang out with each other.
Oh yeah, and I know that a lot of the players talk about it. They love it. I mean, obviously some of them might not like it, but most of them say they absolutely love it. It does kind of give that college feeling again of, you're moving back in. And it's not for too long, so most of them can bear whether it is the heat in the dorms or whatever it is. So yeah. But the only other thing before we get into week 10 again, John had another comment here that caught my eye here. He just said he's glad that there's no international games. So I just wanted to ask you, are you also very happy that there are no international games? Because for me, this was like the number one thing I did not want. And this, you kind of do this one, you kind of hear a little bit beforehand as well. But I am the biggest hater against international games, and I'm just glad the Bills didn't. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the only thing I like less than Thursday night football is international football. It's an American game. It should be played here. How many SEC championships has Europe won? 0. No, just kidding. But I think it should stay. I'm not a fan of it. The traveling, it throws it off. and it just feels different. Like watching the game at 9 in the morning, like it isn't quite the same. And like the biggest thing last year, like we say what you will about the Bills' traveling plans, but it definitely seemed to throw them off the next week against the Giants. They looked incredibly flat. Everybody remembers how flat they were against the Jaguars, but it seemed to carry over. So it's one of those things that kind of messes up like your whole, like not just that week, but the week after, and maybe even further down the season. So I think signs are pointing that more games are coming internationally instead of less. Maybe even a team over there someday, which I think would be awful. So yeah, very happy that we did our international time, and now hopefully we have a few years off.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of that way, especially after how last year went. I mean, wasn't even just the Bills looking lethargic. It was, the Jags did have 2 weeks or a week there
Yeah.
prior as well, which played a factor, and they were maybe a little bit more adjusted. The turf as well was another issue there. So a lot of issues with international games. And like you said, hopefully it's just a little bit off now, a few years off for the Bills, off away from international games. But all right, yeah, John's been firing away here. John, I love it, John. Some great comments there. And Marianne, I did see this one as well. Too bad you can never get training camp tickets. Hopefully this year is a little bit better. That's all I'll say. I know that it was a huge thing last year, and it was a little tough to get them last year, but hopefully it's a little bit better this year. But all right, we got to get back though to the schedule here. We got 8 weeks left. We did the first 9, and now we got 8 left. So this is the end stretch, right? It's the final however many, or the final few games here. Hopefully the Bills at this point aren't looking at it as, man, we need to make another run, right? And that's, I think, a lot of Bills fans are hoping not. So week 10, though, you finished with the Dolphins in week 9. Now week 10, you go to Indianapolis. Most likely Anthony Richardson. Hopefully he can stay healthy until then. I know last year he showed some good football, some good quarterbacking early on, and then obviously had the season-ending injury. So what do you think about going to Indy week 10 after finishing up against Miami?
Yeah, it should be a winnable game, maybe another trap game type scenario, depending how the weeks before go. But yeah, like you said, Anthony Richardson, hopefully he's healthy. He's had AC joint issues ever since high school, so seems to be something that's a lingering thing for him. But when he is on the field and playing, he's electric. So I hope he's playing just so we can get a full 4 quarters of watching him play, like locked in on him, not just highlights or whatever you see on Red Zone. So should be a game that the Bills win, but always tough to go on the road in this league. But yeah, definitely. And also another potential trap game because like that look ahead at the next couple games, like, oh, we got the Chiefs next week, then the Niners after that, like could be an easy, like kind of sandwiched in between the Dolphins and the Chiefs. I hope they don't look over and get complacent going into that. Cause remember, those guys get paid to play too. So they're a good team. So hopefully not a look ahead game for the Bills there.
And some people before also, and still even now, say, Anthony Richardson does kind of play a little bit like Josh Allen in that physical football that, does have a big arm, tall guy, can run a little bit. So who knows? Maybe it'll be also kind of that back and forth between Richardson and Allen. Obviously, Richardson's nowhere near Allen, at least right now. But yeah, that's another kind of storyline there, is the similar-ish type of play styles from Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson, at least physique and all that aspect of it. But like you said, could be a trap game because of the next 3 weeks, and we'll just talk about, we'll kind of do it how we did the Ravens, Texans, Jets. This next 3 weeks, week 11, then you go to Kansas City, 4:25. Unfortunately, Taylor Swift can't be there for this one at home.
She can be there.
Oh, I thought she was going to
be
in
there.
Toronto.
Oh yeah, and how close is Toronto to Buffalo?
I know. I thought she had a concert that night. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, hey, put on my tinfoil hat here. So she plays in Toronto on Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, but not Sunday night. So NFL rigged, maybe? I mean, NFL rigged a little bit. Like, are the Swifties taking over the NFL? People are saying.
Yeah, I mean, they did come out and say that they took it into consideration. But I saw so many people saying that she wasn't gonna be able to be there, and
well, Josh Allen's dating a pop star too, and we don't get any special treatment.
Well, I think that part of it is she might not want it as well. So that part is
we don't have to brag about it. Do our talking on the field.
Exactly. But yeah, no, this 3-week stretch is gonna be a big one though. Yeah, you go like we said, Kansas City coming here. I think I might have just said at first going to Kansas City, but Kansas City is coming here, 425. Then you go on a bye week, which is very nice in this stretch. And then you have San Francisco, who again, another top tier team coming back to Buffalo for Sunday night football week 13. So what are your thoughts just on that 3-week stretch there?
Yeah, that's another one where it's if we can win 2 out of 3 of those, we're great. Don't care which 2 they are, just, go above 500 in that 3 games. The Chiefs at least have to come to Buffalo this time in the regular season. Last time they came to Buffalo in the regular season, obviously besides the playoff game last year, was COVID year, so no fans. And by week 11, we'll know exactly where these teams are in the standings and how well they're matching up and kind of what needs to happen to maybe get the 1 seed or win the division or something like that. So definitely a game that could happen in the playoffs, matchup there. And then week 12 bye, perfect time for a bye after a KC game, before the San Francisco game, like a time where the boys probably need a week off. So I think that couldn't have put it in better if we made the schedule for them. San Francisco will be a fun one, Super Bowl runner up. Brock Purdy kind of coming into his own as a top quarterback in the league. Their defensive line just has so many dogs on it. And then there was that receiving core, like Ayuk, Debo Samuel, Greg Kittle, who's George Kittle, a podcast I listen to calls him Greg Kittle, so I always call him Greg Kittle too. George Kittle. They have just a very good group of offensive weapons. Then, don't even get started on Christian McCaffrey, who's the ultimate Swiss Army knife. So, and then the Rams going on the road all the way across the country. They were a playoff team last year. Sean McVay, and then Matthew Stafford. So they're gonna give a good fight offensively just based on who they have over there. So yeah, big 3-game stretch before we go into the stretch run and hit those big December, January games.
Yeah, no, Kansas City, obviously, people I know, I saw a lot of people joking as well online saying, hopefully we lose that game. So then when it gets to the playoffs, we can swap it and win, unlike most years where the Bills win in the regular season and then lose in the playoffs, which I just thought was a little bit funny. But yeah, no, this stretch here is no joke. There's a couple stretches here for the Bills that are tough. Every year you do look at schedules and you say, oh, that's tough. It's a tough schedule. But this year, I know I saw a lot of people saying that this year's opponents and this year's schedule just didn't seem as tough as last year's, where I was the opposite. I think last year was okay. It was good. It was a tough schedule, but this year, man, this is like a gauntlet here for me. You have maybe 2 weeks in a row where it's not as great of opponents. The best stretch, the best stretch is probably those last 3 weeks, which we'll get to. And it's a tough schedule in my opinion. So when you look at these 3 weeks, that bye week is huge in week 12, but Kansas City, San Francisco, LA, those are teams that either have gotten to the Super Bowl or won a Super Bowl in the past 3-4 years, and they have players who are capable of it, as long as they're healthy, obviously. But it's great coaching, great quarterbacking. I know Brock Purdy obviously hasn't proved it for as long as maybe the other two, but still he's done a great job there, and great weapons all over the place. So that 3-week stretch is going to be huge for them. I will ask you this though: out of those, I guess it's a 4-week stretch if you count the bye week, but those 3-game stretch, when you look at Kansas City, San Francisco, LA, and you can even count Detroit in there compared to, or let's do 5-week. I'll ask you this one: 5-week from week 11 to weeks 15. So from Kansas City to Detroit, does that scare you less or more than week 2 to week 6, Dolphins to Jets?
Yeah, it's tough because, like you were saying, how tough the schedule is. You go through it. There's maybe 10 playoff teams that we play this year, and that's not counting playing the Dolphins and the Jets twice. So could be like 12 teams that we play this season who are in the playoffs this year. It's really tough. So the only reason weeks 2 through 6 might scare me a little bit more is just because all of those games are in conference and have maybe a lot more potential playoff seeding implications, tiebreaker implications. Whereas here, the only AFC game we have is the Chiefs. And, I'd rather start off the season a little bit hotter. Last year, I know we got hot at the right time and everything was great. But with the schedule, like we talked about earlier, you can't dig yourself too big of a hole like this team did last year. So I would say maybe that the week 2 through 6 scares me a little bit more, but it's like it's hard to pick. They're
Yeah.
both neither one of them is going to be fun. We're going to have some stressful Sundays and Mondays in that time period as Bills fans. But yeah, it's a gauntlet of a schedule for sure.
Yeah, and I guess I'll play the devil's advocate here. I'll go with the weeks 11 through 15 there. Just I mean, when you do look at it, like you said, it's you don't want to get off to a bad start, but I mean, you want to end right, go too. You want to go good into the playoffs, especially going into division games towards the end of the year. So, I mean, it's back and forth. It could literally be a coin toss of which stretch is worse. You look at the schedule, you could play every single AFC division winner, right? Baltimore could win their division.
Yeah.
Jacksonville or Houston, obviously you do play the AFC South. Kansas City probably wins their division, right? I mean, you look at it and then you even go to San Francisco. They might win their division. Detroit might win
The
theirs.
Lions.
I mean, you could potentially face. Is that every single? No, is it every single? Yeah, every single division.
Is it not but the NFC East? Yeah.
But the NFC East, that's the only one, and that might even be the worst division in the NFC. Actually, no, probably not. The Eagles and Cowboys there. Obviously, the Giants aren't exactly the best team in the world, and Washington's not. But it's tough. You get a lot of division winners, you get a lot of playoff teams, and a lot of teams that also got better in some aspects as well. So, yeah, that 3-week stretch though, from 11 to 4-week stretch, I guess, 11 to 14, those 3-game stretch. That's a tough one there. You get teams that know how to win. And then you go week 15, which we'll just jump right into with Detroit. You go to Detroit, another great crowd there. Great, obviously the turf, some people will talk about that as well. In that aspect, some people are always nervous with certain turfs and everything. So you go to Detroit, a team that is up and coming, kind of reminds me of the Bills from 2-3 years ago when they made the playoffs last year. They made some noise. Now is this year the year they just extended their quarterback? Is this the year that they take that next step and become a top tier team, like elite of the elite? It could be, right? They got a lot of good talent there. So Detroit, week 15, do you look at this game as kind of a must win for the Bills going into those last 3?
Depending upon how the 3 before it go, it really could be a must win. The Lions, yeah, they took that step next year. Like they were like the fun and frisky teams. Like, oh, the Lions, like they're cute. Like Dan Campbell, like he's a guy you want to play for. Everybody likes Jared Goff. Like they got some good players, but last year they were a damn good football team. They were a quarter away from going to the Super Bowl. So this year, yeah, like I think they're looking to take that next step and prove that, hey, that wasn't a fluke. Like we are a top 4 team in the NFL. So it'll be a tough one and not one that we can just look over like maybe in years past. And is a big one before we go into those 3 divisional games down the stretch. That all 3 of those are probably pretty must win. Especially the Pats and the Pats games because they shouldn't be as strong, and then the Jets could be a playoff team. So yeah, this is one of those games that would be really nice to get a win before it's like, all right, like here's our stretch run. Like we need to play mistake three football for really the next 2 months through the Super Bowl. So yeah, that'd be a big win and a big confidence boost, especially if the Lions are having the kind of season that they had last year. To get a win there, it's like, hey, we just beat a team that has aspirations of winning the Super Bowl. Like we're that kind of team still too. So yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, and you're facing another team that is you're facing a team that again that knows the teams that you're facing as well. So when they do look at you and they're looking at, hey, they just played the Rams. Let's see how they matched up. We played the Rams. We kind of can see how they played them, the 49ers as well. So they can kind of look at it and say, hey, they just played 2 other NFC teams right before us. We're the third one. And now we know how they play interconference games. And maybe it changes the way that Detroit plays against them. And, for the Bills, it will be a little bit tough to kind of go in there against a team that is always fired up, well coached. You like you said, with just talent across the board, and they can beat you in pretty much every way. So Detroit, that's a game you can't take lightly at all, especially going into a stretch that afterwards you should look at least for 2 out of the 3 and be like, thank you, Lord. Let's just calm down here to end the season here. But week 16, 18, we'll talk about just those 2 games, I guess. Patriots, You start away at week 16, and then you go home to end the year. You go to New England. So, opposite of what I just said. So what do you think though about those two Patriots games? And are you shocked that they kind of kept the Patriots for last out of all division teams for the Bills?
Yeah, like I said earlier, I thought it would be the Dolphins and the Jets down the stretch. I thought maybe we'd play like each AFC's team one time in the last 3 weeks. If it was going to be two of them, definitely didn't think it would be the Patriots. Happy that it is because on paper they are the weakest team in the AFC East and honestly one of the weaker teams in the NFL. Maybe by this point, Drake May is playing. I know the plan is for him to start, but by the end of the year, it's kind of like, hey, we're already out of it. Let's see what we got kind of thing. Hopefully it's 2 wins that the Bills can take care of business. I know they're decent sized favorites in both of those games as of now, but a million things are going to change between now and December, January. So yeah, happy that they have them down the stretch because if they're in a tight division race and it's, neck and neck, us in Miami, us or the Jets, and they have to play each other and we have to play the Patriots twice, like that could really work out in the Bills' favor for sure.
Yeah, and the Patriots are one of those teams that this year is a team that you're going to want to see how they come out, right? You're going to see how the defense looks without Bill Belichick. You're going to want to see if Drake May comes in, what week he does come in. I know I have a couple buddies that are Pats fans, and they're super excited to see him. They know that it might be a little bit till they officially see him. And hopefully it's not one of those, hey, let's have Drake May start, and all of a sudden it's bad weather and he doesn't have to do much, and they can kind of have a Mac Jones little let's throw the ball twice and win the game. But yeah, it's a game that I don't think is necessarily, we talked about some trap games. I don't think these would be trap games, especially because they are late in the season, which I do like. Patriots with the defense that they have shown in the past. Obviously, Bill Belichick, will see how much credit he deserves from that defense this year. But you look at this Patriots team early on, maybe you would look at it as, oh, it's the Patriots, whatever, we'll just take care of business. But now that it's week 16 and 18, you'll, one, know who the Patriots are a little bit more, and two, you'll know what you'll need to do. So if the pressure's on, you won't be taking them as light. So for me, I agree with you. I like that they're late. You always like to have the worst teams late, I guess, in case you do need to make that late push. But it's interesting that they still put them that late, because I think the schedule, to me, it tells me that the league is looking at the Bills as, hey, we have no idea what to expect from this team this year, and we're going to play it safe. We're not going to put them against top-tier teams late. We're going to put the Patriots late just in case the Bills maybe are out of the division race by then. Hopefully not. I don't think they will be. But maybe if they are, the NFL is looking at it as that way. So Patriots week 16 and 18, I like it. You get two teams that are used to the cold. At least neither team has to complain about that either. So, there we go. But then week 17, last game of the that we'll talk about here, since we obviously just talked about week 18. Week 17 could be a huge one, right? I talked a little bit earlier about maybe the league is looking at the Jets as that team. I mean, they had 7 primetime games, the tied for the most in the league. They're looking at the Jets to make some noise, especially if Aaron Rodgers can stay healthy. We know what that defense can do. So week 17, do you think this game will be not for the division, but pretty much a win or you're not winning the division type of game, kind of a division or all type of game?
Yeah, it really could be. Biggest thing, like you said a bunch of times, and we'll say a bunch more times going in, it's just, can the Jets stay healthy? And that's not just Aaron Rodgers. That's kind of across the whole board there. Mike Williams, big receiver they brought in, can't stay healthy. On the defense, they got some guys who get banged up. But yeah, this is one of those games. I know right now it's scheduled for 1 o'clock. Could be a flex into a prime time if they're both neck and neck for that division race, especially with them not playing each other in week 18. Maybe it gets flex. But yeah, this is a big one. Happy that it's at home, because down the stretch that having the home field advantage is huge. So this is definitely one to circle in the last month of the season, that if the Bills win this game, they're probably in pretty good shape.
Yeah, and this could be a game that I see getting also could be changed to a primetime game, depending on what we see once we get to week 17. If they do look at it and say, hey, let's say the Dolphins are struggling, right? The Dolphins are, or maybe the Dolphins are just a game or two behind here and there's 2 weeks left. They say, hey, we're going to bump this game up. This might be for the division here. So yeah, that's the one. The Jets, I said earlier, the Jets scare me. They do. I hate to admit it, but that defense, man, the way Josh Allen plays against that defense puts a little bit of fear into me. So the Jets, out of all the teams in the division, they're the ones that scare me, and I'm glad that at least the home game against the Jets is late, because if we need it, we'll need everybody out there and all Bills Mafia out there to help make some noise and throw Aaron Rodgers off and the rest of the Jets. So there's just our thoughts, though, on the entire schedule. I did see John here also with another comment at the end. Give us your record predictions. Now, for me, this isn't, for me at least, a set in stone one. I haven't gone game by game. I haven't really gone in depth with it. For me, I'm just going to go an easy 11-6. I see them going through a few stretches. I don't see them dropping both to Miami if they do, so I see them splitting there. Same with the Jets. I think they'll squeeze one out, and then I think they'll beat the Pats. So division-wise, I think they'll get what they need, and then I think you look at the rest of the schedule. I think Cardinals, that's a win. Titans should be a win. Seattle should be a win. Indy should be a win, and then I think you win 2 out of the 4 between that game between week 11 and week 15. And then again, same with week 2 through 6. I think you at least win at least 2 there. So for me, I'm going to go 11-6. That's not official yet. I will put an official one out maybe later, maybe once all three, me, you, and once it gets closer to the season, me, you, and Lance will give our official ones. But I'm going to go 11-6 for right now after a few days of being able to look at the schedule. So what do you got for your record prediction?
Yeah, 11-6 is right around where I had them too. I'm thinking anywhere between 10-7 and 12-5. So yeah, 11-6 is pretty much where I had them. And I had kind of the same thoughts as you. Beat the Cardinals in the opener, they should, and then that 5-game stretch between the Dolphins and the Jets, if they can go 3-2, that'd be good. If they can go 4-1, that'd be unbelievable. And then take Tennessee and Seattle, and then maybe they drop one of those 2 to the Dolphins. You're figuring in, and then, like you said, 2-2 in that big 4-week stretch there in November, December would be big, and then they can finish out 3-0 at home, and then in New England against the Patriots. Yeah, that puts them right at 11-6, 12-5, 10-7, somewhere in there. I think their Vegas over/under win total right now is 10.5. Those guys usually tend to know what they're talking about, unfortunately. So yeah, I have them right in that same range.
Yeah. So yeah, let us know down below what your guys' record predictions here. I see Johnny here's got 13-4. I will never. I know some people will always say, "Oh, you're just a homer." I don't ever get that. I mean, aren't you supposed to be a fan? You want them. You're supposed to think they're going to win, right? I always see people like, "Oh, you just think they're going to win because they're your team." Well, yeah, it's what everybody does, right? I feel like everybody does that. So.
I always say I go into every Bills game thinking they're going to lose. So I'm kind of the opposite of it. Like, I get so nervous that I just go in like, yeah, they're not going to win. Like, they're not going to. And that kind of helps me, manage my expectations. So I'm kind of almost the opposite.
You can't be disappointed if you go in expecting them to lose, right? So
that's right.
I get it. Yeah. I know a lot of people that do that as well, right? And if they win, then it's even more joy than you would if you thought they were going to win, right? So yeah, let us know though down below. I know, Johnny, you got the over as well. Smash it. Maybe Bill's going to have a huge season. Hey, hopefully they do have a huge season. But there's the schedule talk. And before we do get into, we're going to talk a little bit of offensive line here. I know we're already a little bit over an hour, so we might just fly through offensive line a little bit. There's not really too much to talk about the offensive line, in my opinion. I know you might think the same as well, but we'll see once we get into it. But before we do get into that, you had your 1 minute segment. I got mine now, so I'm going to just take over here. I'm going to pop Scott off here, put me here. And all right, so now we got my 1 minute segment. Scott got to talk about the schedule release a little bit and that whole process. I'm going to talk about something completely different. A lot of recently on Twitter, especially, I've been seeing a lot of compilations of James Cook and his drops, right? He had some pretty brutal ones last year. It was his first real big role in this offense. A lot of them were wide open. Were just, a lot of us could have caught them, right? I mean, we a lot of people want to say, "Oh, I could do what NFL players do," but a lot of these drops by Cook, a lot of NFL fans probably actually could catch them, right? Josh Allen lofted them to him or whatever, and maybe not all of them, but they were pretty bad drops. To me, however, they are concentration drops. And what does that usually say? Usually is an inexperienced player, in my opinion, that has those concentration drops. Now, if he gets to year 4 or 5 and it's still happening, then we know it's not just inexperience. But To me, that's just an experience from James Cook. We've seen him be reliable in college out of the backfield. We know that he can hold on to the ball. Obviously, he has had some little instances here and there, but in college, never fumbled the ball. Now he comes out, fumbles his first one. He's had some ups and downs there. So I just want to know your guys' thoughts. Does it worry you going into the season? Excuse me, that James Cook had those drops, and do you think that it will be a problem for him this year? I'm gonna go put that on my Twitter right now. I do have that question up there, so go ahead, let me know in the comments there. You guys, every time I post this, the past 2 weeks have been just awesome with replying. I know I try to reply to as many of them as I can, but sometimes you guys are just it's sometimes it's overwhelming how many comments you guys have, but I love reading them. So really go down, let me know what you guys think, and if you guys do think it will be an issue for James Cook this year, because I personally don't think if it is an issue, I don't think it will be nearly as big. Maybe 1-2 bad drops, but yeah, we'll see what happens with that. So let me know what you guys think in the comments over on Twitter there as well. Built in Buffalo page will retweet it, so if you need to find it, you can just go find it there. But yeah, that's my topic for this week, James Cook and his drops. I've seen a lot of people talking about it, so just wanted your thoughts on that. But yeah, that was my quick little 1 minute there. I'm gonna bring Scott back in here. There we are. Gonna switch the sides there we go. All right, so yeah, there we are. What do you think though, I guess, of that James Cook and his drops?
Yeah, he seemed to have them at the least opportune times last season, which was the worst part. Dropped 4 walk-in touchdowns, really. And then he made some tough catches, too. Like the touchdown he caught against the Cowboys, like Josh threw it a little bit low. And he was, running full speed. And he like dropped his hands down below his knees and just picked it out of the air. It was nice. And then, dropped all the easy ones. Maybe he's the kind of guy who like thinks about it too much, or he's thinking about what he's going to do with the ball before he actually looks it in and catches it, or he's thinking about what he's going to do for his touchdown celebration before he catches it. But yeah, I hope it's not a problem for him this year. I don't think it will be. I'd imagine that if he didn't buy him a jugs machine, for the offseason, somebody in his family better have. So yeah, just work on it, and then hopefully it's not a problem that carries along with him in his career, because I think he's going to have a really big role in this offense this season. Obviously, last year, probably even more so this year. And a lot of that's going to be catching the ball out of the backfield. So we need him to be as sure-handed as possible for the Bills to be successful.
Yeah, and we're talking about James Cook a little bit, but we are going to get into the guys that are going to be blocking for him and the guys that are going to be opening up the holes for him who, maybe 3 months ago we thought, oh, we're not going to have to really worry about this conversation. We're not going to have a lot to talk about with this. Now, all of a sudden, you cut Mitch Morse is gone. You move Connor McGovern to center. They re-signed David Edwards. You still obviously have Deion Dawkins there. You have Osiris Torrance, Spencer Brown. I think, that's probably to both of us the offensive line we're thinking week 1. Not too much question in that aspect. But I just want to talk to you about the offensive line a little bit, because there are still some questions. One is the offensive line depth. I'm going to start it off here. Is offensive line depth something that the Bills still need to improve after June 1st once they get that extra money? Or do you think they've done a good job at filling those holes at the depth positions?
I think the offensive line is actually pretty deep. Obviously, we thought we were going to have the same offensive line as last year, like you said. And one of those rare teams last year that started the same offensive line combination in every game, which does not happen in the NFL, especially at a position where you're basically going through a mini car crash in every single play. But the fact that they stayed as healthy as they were and they gelled together and got better as the year went on was awesome. The offensive line, I was an offensive lineman, so I can speak to it pretty well. You play together as a unit, and when you know who you're playing next to, you know their strengths, you know their weaknesses, and you kind of get to know, like on certain run plays, like where we may need to like double the nose and go up to the linebacker, or like, hey, like I know that you can handle him one-on-one. I don't even have to chip him. I can just go up to the next level or something like that. So they were playing really well together as a unit. So a little surprised they decided to shake that up, cutting Mitch Morse, but kind of looking at everything that happened this offseason, they probably had some kind of idea that they were going to have to move Stephon Diggs. So they knew that cap space was really going to be something that was valuable. So that $8 million ended up mattering. So I think the offensive line is actually pretty deep, though. You mentioned the 5 guys who should start. drafted Cedric Von Granger, who can probably come in and start if needed to. He shouldn't need to, but probably could, and can play either of the guard positions and center. They signed La'el Collins, who can start at either tackle position and has started at either tackle position in his career, can also come in and play guard if he has to. Signed Will Clapp, who might not even end up making the team at this point with, drafting Von Granger. But he can play either guard. He can play center. David Edwards can kind of play all over the line. So I think it's a actually a pretty deep part of this roster. So I'm excited to see how they do this year. Obviously, a new center, Connor McGovern, going to be a question. Started at left guard for them last year. Now he moves into center. How will that work? But if it doesn't work out, they have the pieces that kind of mix and match on the line.
Yeah, and it was a surprise to see Mitch Morse be gone, like you said. But, I think they also saw it as, hey, we can also get younger as well. And now at the same time, keep a lot of the same offensive line we have and just get rid of one. Move Connor McGovern inside. David Edwards was often that sixth offensive lineman out there. And it seemed like they did like him. Again, he's a guy that has experience on winning teams. He knows how to play the game well. So I'm excited to see the starting five. I still think O'Cyrus Torrence will make another step there. And I think, Spencer Brown, he was the guy that a lot of people going into last year had a lot of questions. Played very well, I think, considering what he had the season before. Dion Dawkins had one of the best seasons of his careers, which is kind of funny to me as well, because I remember in training camp, people were worried about him and worried about his just fitness level and getting beat in training camp, which just, again, tells you training camp is to get back into it, get going there. And Dion Dawkins had one of the best seasons of his career. But yeah, depth-wise, I really like what they've done. I think La'el Collins, again, can be a guy that can, if you need to, he can play tackle. He can go inside if you need him to necessarily. He has experience there. Von Granger can go all over. Another guy experienced on winning football teams. I know it's not the NFL that he's won in, but winning top-tier teams. The SEC he's played against, so he's played against very good talent still, and he was a leader on that offensive line at a very, very good college football team. So, and then you got Van Denmark coming back, Alec Anderson. I mean, we didn't Tylen Grable, who necessarily might not make the opening day roster. Even Richard, I'm always going to mispronounce his last name, but Greg, I'm probably completely off on that. But he was a guy that people were excited about last year. Will Clapp, like you mentioned. And then you bring in some other guys as well. Tommy Doyle's going to be back as well. So I think depth-wise, this offensive line is going to look very, very good. I think you're going to see guys, if they do go down, hopefully they don't, but if they do, guys that should be able to step up and fill those roles. So I'm excited to see this offensive line, and I don't think they necessarily even need to do anything. If they, I really don't, unless maybe the guy gets cut right before training camp and you can get him on a cheap deal, sure, bring him in, but I wouldn't see them spending any major money, at least of that $10 million that will free up of Trey White's. I don't see them spending it on offensive line if they do spend it at all. But I did have another question though about the offensive line with the interior changes. You talked about you obviously played offensive line. I did not play offensive line. I was not an offensive lineman. I'm not exactly the biggest guy in the world, but when you look at the offensive line, interior offensive line more specifically, you have a young guard in O'Cyrus Torrence who played well last year, struggled at certain times, but played pretty well for a rookie. You're moving a guy now from guard to center, and now you're moving a non-starter to a starting role. Do you have any concern about the chemistry and the just way that middle of the offensive line will flow with a young guy and two guys that are now stepping into new roles?
Yeah, definitely a little bit of concern that it's a different setup as last year. But the one thing that kind of eases that is all three of these guys were here last year. It's not like we signed a free agent to kind of like plug a hole in the offensive line, just moving guys around that were already in the room together all of last season. Played a lot of snaps. Like McGovern and didn't O'Cyrus Torrence play every snap last season? And McGovern played damn near all of them. And Edwards was our sixth offensive lineman who went in. The guys got banged up during the game and was our sixth offensive lineman that would come in for extra offensive lineman plays. They were playing together in practice. And I'm sure that they moved each other all around in practice just in case, to have all of their doomsday operations prepared. So yeah, I think it'll take them a little bit of time to figure out the right chemistry, but the fact that they were all together last year really, I think, helps kind of flatten out that learning curve.
Yeah, and it doesn't help, or it doesn't hurt. Excuse me, it doesn't hurt to have also a pretty good offensive line coach there that showed that he can put it together, and he can get these guys working it as a unit. So I think Josh Allen will be happy with what he's got this year. Maybe he'll get him a bigger gift than last year, depending on how they play. I know every year we see the Christmas gifts, and he gets the offensive lineman all gifts and everything. But yeah, I just wanted to ask you that real quick, and then I did want to ask you one other question here. Obviously, like we said, we know pretty much the starting unit. We already know some of the backups. However, there's some guys here that can play football very well that might not even be able to make this roster. So, out of the late round picks that we've seen, even undrafted free agents, does anybody stand out that you think that can make a major push to make the final 53?
Yeah, I think Von Pron Granger. I think he most likely makes the team. He was a fifth round pick. But it's kind of weird. He was a fifth round pick, but he was like the second or third center in this year's draft class. If he came out last year, like we talked about a couple weeks ago, probably would have been a second or third round pick. Centers just don't get a whole lot of love in the draft, which, as someone who's played center, kind of BS. It's a tough position to play. But yeah, I think he's a guy that could fill in and maybe be the starting center, and next year after, something like that. Because he's young and he's on a 4-year deal, and I think that if something does happen this year and someone gets hurt and we have to shuffle some things around, that he could step in and play some big snaps for the Bills this year. And getting that kind of production out of a fifth round pick is kind of a rare thing in the NFL. So he is my guy to kind of look at. But I think that's kind of the cop out answer, because he's, like we said, he was a fifth round pick, but he's a hell of a lot better than that. So Tylan Grable, a guy I'm looking at. I don't know if he'll make the team, just because we are, like we said, really deep in that offensive line. But he's a big boy, and if he's quick enough to keep up with some NFL edge rushers, or maybe they can even move him inside where he can be a little bit more physical, use his size, a guy that I'll definitely be watching in camp and see how he stacks up, because he's just a really big guy who, if he has the footwork, could potentially have an NFL career.
Yeah, he was a guy that I see a lot of people talking about. Obviously, Pran Granger, I think as well. I'm gonna agree with you on that one. I think he does end up making the 53. I don't think that they even would take the risk at putting him on practice squad. I think they say, "Hey, you were a fifth round pick.
Yeah,
We saw you maybe we even saw you better than a fifth round pick, but we got you in the fifth round." The one guy I do see people talking about is Keaton Bills. Obviously that'd be a fun story. That'd be a great story to have Keaton Bills make the roster. Tyler Grable is another one. I mentioned Richard Goreg for a little bit. He was a guy who played at Florida, right? Played at right alongside Osiris Torrance, actually. I think he could be a guy that makes a push, maybe for a practice squad, and maybe gets called up if they do have an injury. And then the other guy that I know I mentioned him a while ago. He's an undrafted free agent. This might be a long shot. This might be the long shot one. Is Campbell's offensive tackle Mike Edwards? Again, he's a guy kind of like Grable, 6'7", 355. So he's got the size, right? He was a former 4-star. Obviously went to a smaller school, but who knows? Maybe he does come in and prove, hey, I can play with the big boys. I can really get in there and learn and take what my knowledge is and put it to use with my 6'7", 355 body there. So he's a guy that I'm just curious about. I'm not necessarily going to say he's definitely going to make the roster or even the practice squad. But yeah, he's a guy that I'm definitely curious to see to see how he performs in training camp and in OTAs and everything. So he's a guy, I've mentioned him a couple times. I've watched him just a little bit, not too much, but for a small school guy, he'd be the one to keep an eye on, at least for the undrafted free agents, in my opinion, over Britton or Keaton Bills, in my opinion. But yeah, obviously I don't think, though, it's going to be tough for any of them to make it. It's going to be real tough because, again, like we said, they got pretty good depth already, and they pretty much have the starting team all set there. But any last thoughts on the offensive line before we kind of wrap it up here? Because we're at an hour 20 right now, and we've kind of been flowing here. But yeah, offensive line, like I said, not too much to dive into with it because it's pretty much already set. So any last thoughts on the offensive line?
Yeah, I think the offensive line is one of the stronger position groups on this Bills roster. So I'm excited to see how some of the young guys hopefully take that next step. Torrance, we talked about. Spencer Brown took a huge next step last season. I think a lot of that was him just finally being healthy. So if he can go through another full year being healthy, hopefully he takes another step forward. Deion Dawkins, just keep being a top 5 left tackle in the NFL. Just keep doing what you're doing, big guy. And then interested to see how McGovern does at center. I've heard he's actually a better center than a guard. So hopefully that is true. And then David Edwards, first full year starting. As of now on paper, who knows, he could get beat out, but he showed flashes last year of having some real talent. So I think that this unit is going to be one of the stronger points of the Bills roster. And the way the Bills seem to want to play this year, a lot of running the ball, a lot of 2 tight end stuff, they're going to have to be if they want to really groove the way that they want to.
Yeah, and James Cook, we think, right, will become more of a focal point, as even more than he was towards the end of last year, and it's going to start with the 5 up front and sixth offensive lineman that does come in there. So I'm excited to see this offensive line. Obviously, I'm personally, when it comes to positions, offensive line is not my expertise at all. So it's really awesome to also hear you talk offensive line, because as much as I do watch them and I know a little bit all about offensive line, when I look at it, like I said, I've never been even over 160 pounds. So I've never been an offensive lineman. So that's not my expertise there. But yeah, offensive line, though, it's going to be fun to watch. A lot of people had questions last year. Not as many this year. Not nearly as many this year. And that is a good thing, because at the end of the day, you win and you lose in the trenches on both sides of the ball. And having a great offensive line is one of the most important things in the game of football. So yeah, we'll see how the offensive line does. But that's pretty much going to do it for us here. I do see Johnny. Don't worry. I do see your comment. However, I'm going to say we are going to talk definitely safeties and secondary at another show, with whether it's me, Lance, Scott, Lance, and all 3 of us, whoever it is. We will talk about it at a different show. Not going to dive into it right now about who's going to make the team when it comes to safeties, corners, secondary right now. But trust me, we will get to that question. I know that's a question that a lot of people are wondering this year, especially after a year from the entire situation that did happen with him as well. But we will get into it. But that's going to do it for us here, though. Everybody, again, you guys were awesome in the comments. Lance, we wish you were here. Hope maybe if you're watching, I'm not sure if he's watching. We do miss you, Lance. He will be back next week, though, so not too long. But I do believe, Scott, you are going to be missing next week, correct?
Yeah, I'm gone next weekend. Don't miss me too much, everybody, but I'm going to be in St. Lucia officiating a wedding. So I can promise you I won't miss you from the beach with my drink in my hand. So, but yeah, gonna miss doing the show. Just kidding. But at least it's for a good reason. So, and if Lance, if you are watching, you should have just done the show. I'll say that.
Yeah, come on, Lance. No, but yeah, no, Lance will be back next week, though, and then even Scott will miss next week, but he'll be back the week after that, so it's not gonna be too long. You won't have to wait too long to see Scott again, though. But Scott, any of the last words for the Mafia here, as Sandra says good night? Good night, Sandra. Thanks for tuning in. But any last words?
Yeah, just appreciate everybody watching. I know it's only our 3rd show. We're only going to continue to get better, but the support we've gotten so far has been truly remarkable. This has been a blast, and we're only going to get better going forward. So appreciate everybody tuning in, even in May when there's no real football to talk about. But that's what makes our fan base so special, that we're willing to follow Bill's content at any part of the year. And then when we actually do have some ball to talk about, we'll all be that much more knowledgeable for it.
Yeah, no, yeah, definitely. It's awesome. Even I love seeing your guys' thoughts as well down in the comments. I mean, we learn from you guys learn from us. It goes both ways, and we also just get different perspectives, right? It's always awesome to see different perspectives. But that's gonna do it for us. Another good hour and a half here, a little bit under an hour and a half. But again, you guys are awesome. You guys stay till the end too. That's the best part, is you guys really are here throughout the whole thing. So appreciate you guys always. Next week, we'll see what we talk about next week. Not gonna be talking schedule anymore, because we already went over it fully. But we'll see what we talk about next week. We'll have that surprise for you guys later in the week on social media and everything. We'll announce that. But yeah, appreciate all you guys. And as always, go Bills and go Built in Buffalo.